President.
Senator from Florida.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that I be allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes, as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I wanted to come to the floor again today and discuss the Zika virus, which has been in the news quite often in my home state of Florida and nationally. I wanted to enter into the record in a moment here a number of articles that have appeared just in the last week in papers across the state of Florida. On the 7th of May, the newspaper in Pensacola, with the headline, "Panhandle Conditions Create a Zika Powder Keg." And the argument it makes is that that part of the state, as much of the areas in the South, is an area where you find prevalent species of mosquito, which is the primary one that is now transmitting the Zika virus. It goes on to say that as temperatures rise and rainfall increases, these are the two elements that that mosquitoes need to spread. And so there is going to be a massive spread, as there is every year, in the specific species of mosquitoes that transmit the Zika virus in the panhandle of Florida. And so I ask unanimous consent that this Pensacola News Journal article dated May 7th be entered into the record. The second article comes about and it finds that the Zika findings could be game changers, opening doors to research. It begins by saying two groups of scientists reported Wednesday that fetal mice infected with Zika showed brain damage, a finding that confirms the prevailing view that the virus can disrupt the development of fetal brains in humans and provides a clear avenue to study the problem. The work should put to rest lingering doubts in some quarters that the Zika outbreak sweeping through Latin America and the Caribbean is responsible for a surge in babies born with microcephaly and other brain anomalies. And it goes on to quote an associate professor of pathology at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. It says, "Let me put it bluntly, these are game changers. We need to move forward now." There's an article dated May 10th in the Miami Herald. The headline, "Two new Zika cases in Miami-Dade raised the state total to 109. Florida health officials confirmed 2 new Zika infections in Miami-Dade on Tuesday, raising the statewide total to 109 people who have contracted the virus this year, now more than any other state. In Miami-Dade alone, where most of Florida's Zika cases have been reported, 44 people have been infected with the virus, said the State Health Department. The disease has not yet been transmitted locally by mosquito bites. Broward County has reported 15 cases of Zika. Today, by 5 o'clock today, I'll meet with the governor of our state, who is up here asking for federal aid to prepare for and combat the virus in the state of Florida. Again, as the governor says, quote, "It's going to get warmer, we're going to have more rainfall, we're probably going to see more mosquitoes in our state. Our federal government has a variety of plans they're talking about. We've got to address the Zika issue. Hopefully we can get ahead of it." But it isn't just limited to Florida. Here's an article from USA Today dated May 6th, 2016. Headline, "Gulf Coast could be ground zero for Zika." The Gulf Coast may know hurricanes, but this year the region of 60 million people could find itself unprepared and at ground zero for a different type of storm, a mosquito-borne Zika epidemic. A look at the region's urban hubs, small towns, and rural outposts show a patchwork of preparedness. Cities such as Houston have robust plans in place, while smaller towns such as Corpus Christi struggle with fewer resources. Mr. President, this is just part of painting an overall picture of this very serious problem. And by the way, I would just say that the notion that we should only be worried about Florida or states in the Gulf Coast alone would not be wise. The mosquitoes that infect people are found in 30 of the 50 states in this country. There are now Zika infections and Zika cases in multiple states across the country. And by the way, we now know that Zika isn't just transmitted through mosquitoes, but can also be sexually transmitted. In fact, the only case of transmission in Florida was one that was sexually transmitted in Central Florida. And so as we debate all of these other important issues, this is a looming public health crisis. This is the situation that we are facing now in this country, and the time to act has come. The moment to act has come. Because right now we are facing in this body and here in Washington, D.C., a debate about this issue, about how much money we're going to spend on it. And look, the President has proposed $1.9 billion to deal with it. About $500 billion of that is designed to pay back the Ebola funding that has been used in the short term to fill in the gap. But the rest of it is for real programs that go into dealing with this issue, and in particularly dealing with it on the island of Puerto Rico, that has been disproportionately impacted by this. When I hear people say there hasn't been any cases of Zika transmitted in the United States, they're wrong. People of Puerto Rico are American citizens. They travel to this country extensively. It is our responsibility to also fight and care for them in this process. But the bottom line is, it is not a question of if, it is a question of when. There will be a mosquito transmission of Zika in the United States, in the continental United States, at some point over the next few days, weeks, or months. And we cannot get caught unprepared to deal with its consequences. And its consequences, by the way, are not just pregnant women, which in and of itself is reason to act. I don't mean that to diminish it. The impact on pregnant women and on their unborn children is extraordinary and devastating. The science on that is indisputable. We're seeing evidence of it all across the world, and especially in the Western Hemisphere, being impacted by it. So that alone is reason to act. But there is now a definitive link between Zika and Guillain-Barré, a debilitating, often fatal neurological condition that we know is associated with this. And by the way, these children that are being born after being infected in the womb with Zika, we don't know what the long-term prognosis is. Just because they're not born with microcephaly does not mean they will not suffer from other neurological deficiencies or other neurological conditions in the years to come. We simply don't know. It is not just a first trimester threat anymore. We now know that Zika can be transmitted and can do serious damage in the second trimester as well. We know that soon the Olympic Games will be played in Brazil, and that means hundreds of thousands of people will travel from and through the United States to the Olympics and back. We know that we have constant visitors coming in and out of this country. How do you think you get to 109 cases in Florida? These are people that have either traveled abroad or have been infected by a partner in the one case that I've said. And so this is an issue we should jump on with a real sense of urgency. And it is a federal responsibility to be involved in this. It is the job of the federal government to keep our people safe from external threats. And Zika today is an external threat spreading to this country, a country that is at the epicenter of global commerce and transit. It is just a matter of time before someone contracts Zika through a mosquito bite here in the United States, and we have not prepared for it. Localities and states are doing the best they can with their limited resources, but they do not have the comprehensive resources that the federal government can bring to bear. They don't have the resources for research that the federal government can bring to bear. They don't have the ability to deal with it at the ports of entry the way the federal government can. And so these are important priorities that I hope we will move on. Now, in the last few hours, I've heard encouraging reports that there are a number of efforts going on behind the scenes here in the Senate, at least one of them in a bipartisan way, to begin to address this issue. And over the next few hours, we'll meet with the different stakeholders and others who are engaged in this issue to see if we can come up with a way forward. But here's what I hope we won't do. I hope that we will not politicize this issue. Zika is not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. It shouldn't be a campaign issue, although I promise you it will become one if we have a Zika outbreak in the United States and we're back home doing our constituent work, not here voting, and people are going to want to know, why did you do nothing on this issue? You knew it was coming. It was clearly broadcast and predicted. All the indicators were there, and nothing happened. Inaction on this is, quite frankly, inexcusable. And I don't believe voters will excuse us for refusing to act on this. But it shouldn't be a political issue. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. It shouldn't be used for one party to beat up on the other. I hope that we can take it. There's so many other issues we could have that fight over. Not on this. Not where the real lives of real people are at stake. And so my hope here is that very soon, and I mean in the next couple of days, we can bring before this body a way forward on this issue that brings both parties together, that deals with this public health crisis in a responsible way. And let me say, look, we are running a debt in this country. And so if there's a way to pay for it, and I believe there can be a way to pay for it, I'm all for it. I have ideas about how we can come up with some of that money. We can find $1.4, $1.5, $1.9 billion to cut somewhere to pay for this. And I think we should endeavor to do so. But even if we cannot, we should never allow the inability to agree on how to pay for it to stand in the way of addressing a public health crisis that threatens to become a public health catastrophe. I prefer that we pay for it. I am for it. But I am not going to let that stand in the way, objection to that, stand in the way to addressing this issue. And so, through all the other issues we're debating up here today, from presidential campaigns to water projects, I still do not believe that we have given sufficient intensity, urgency, or attention to this burgeoning issue that threatens the safety and security of our people. And so, Mr. President, it is my hope that over the next few hours and days, we can come forward in a bipartisan way with a way forward, and we'll continue to work to address that and achieve it. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.